Shouldn't look at me like that.
Like what?
Like you forgot I'm your best friend's sister.
I didn't forget.
Welcome to Tiana Love Stories. Happy weekend, everyone. Where are you watching from? Camilla Jones was 34, founder of C. Jones Architecture Group, and the only person who knew her firm was dying. She had been managing the crisis alone for 6 weeks. Failed investor calls, quiet rejections, the recovery window shrinking every day. Too proud to ask for help, she stared at the numbers on her desk when her assistant knocked. "There's someone here to see you. No appointment. I tried to stop him, but he..." The door opened. Camilla looked up, and her stomach dropped straight to the floor. Tyler Brett was not the boy she remembered. The boy she remembered was 21 years old, her younger brother's best friend, standing on a balcony at her brother's graduation party with a drink he wasn't tasting, and a dream that a room full of people had just laughed out of existence. She had given him 40 minutes of her honest attention and walked away thinking he would be something someday. Someday had apparently arrived. He filled the doorway, composed in a suit with eyes locked onto hers, and a smile that told her he had been waiting for exactly this moment for a very long time. "Camilla," he said her name slowly. "Tyler, this is a surprise." "Is it?" He walked in without being invited and sat down across from her desk with the unhurried ease of a man who had already decided the chair was his before he reached it. He looked at her the way he had looked at her once before, like she was the only fixed point in the room and everything else was just background noise. "How long have the investor calls been failing?" Her jaw tightened. "I don't know what you're..." 3 to 6 weeks. He said it quietly, so completely certain. "Every door is closing. You cannot figure out why because the work is excellent, and the portfolio is strong, and none of it makes sense." He paused. "I know why." The room felt smaller suddenly. "Tyler." He reached into his jacket and placed a document on her desk. He set it down and left his hand resting on top of it for just a moment, like he was delivering something he had been carrying for a long time. "Your firm's debt," he said. "I own it now. In exchange, see, Jones Architecture Group works exclusively on Brett development projects until it's cleared, beginning with my company's new headquarters." He finally moved his hand from the document. "I've been waiting 5 years to come back, Camilla. I told you I would." Her breath caught. Just for a second. Just enough that she knew he saw it. The memory hit her before she could stop it. Austin's graduation party. Chicago. 5 years ago. She had come for her brother and planned to leave within the hour. The apartment was loud and crowded, and she had done her sisterly duty. Hugged him, met his friends, laughed at the right moments, and she had slipped out to the balcony for air and found she wasn't alone. He was standing at the railing with a drink he wasn't tasting and an expression he was doing a reasonable job of covering. She was an architect. She read structures carefully, buildings and people. "Rough night?" she asked. He looked at her, a quick assessment, slightly surprised, something like he had expected whoever came through that door to leave him alone. "Something like that," he said. She could have left it there. She didn't. "What happened?" Something about the directness of it made him answer honestly. He told her about the idea he had been building for 2 years, a real estate concept he had described to the wrong room and watched their faces do what faces did when they had already decided something was impossible. The dismissal had been polite and complete. She listened the way she listened to a project brief, looking for structure, and found the problem before he finished. The foundation was wrong. The vision was sound. She told him exactly what it would take and watched something happen in his face, like no one had ever told him the truth about his own idea before. Austin appeared at the balcony door. "They're looking for you inside, Tyler." She smiled at Tyler on her way past. "It was really nice talking to you," she said. She was halfway through the door when his voice came from behind her, quiet and completely certain. "I'll be back for you, Camilla. Remember that." She laughed softly, the way you laughed at something sweet and slightly impossible, and walked back inside without looking back. The after-party was louder and later, and she was in the kitchen getting water when she turned around and found him right there in the dark hallway, closer than she expected. He was looking at her, the way he had been looking at her on the balcony, but with nothing left to cover it, and she looked back and understood that something had been building since that railing conversation. She did not move away. His hands found her waist, her back found the wall. His mouth came down on hers, and she kissed him back equally. Her hands were in his hair, while he was pressing her closer. Austin's voice somewhere down the hall pulled them apart. She stepped back, smoothed her dress. "You're Austin's best friend. This is a mistake." His eyes stayed on hers in the dark. "When I come back, I'm finishing this." He walked out of the hallway toward Austin's voice. She stood alone in the dark for a moment, and then walked back into the party and went home and filed it under something that would never happen and barely thought about him again. She came back to the present to find him watching her from across her desk with the patient expression of a man who had been somewhere very specific for 5 years and had finally arrived exactly where he intended to be. "Get out of my office," she said. "The contract stays." He stood, buttoned his jacket. "Read it when I'm gone. I'm your best friend's older sister, Tyler. Whatever happened at that party was a drunk night, and it meant nothing." Something moved across his face, not hurt. Something quieter than that, and more dangerous. "I'm not here about the kiss, Camilla." His voice was completely level. "I'm here because your firm is dying, and I'm the only option you have left. Read the contract." He walked out and left it on her desk, and she did not touch it for the rest of the day. She spent 4 more days exhausting every alternative, every investor contact, every bank relationship, every door she knew how to knock on, and one by one they all closed. On the 5th day, she picked up her phone and called him. He was in her office within the hour. She negotiated every term herself: scope, timeline, exit conditions, creative control, and Tyler agreed to every single one without resistance. She noticed that, said nothing about it. She signed the contract believing she had no other choice, filed it, straightened her desk, and went back to work. The first thing Tyler did when he walked into her office on Monday morning was move her site model 3 inches to the left without asking. Camilla looked up. "I had that exactly where I wanted it." "The light hits the east face better from this angle." He sat down and opened the project file. "Your timeline for the east wing is off by 3 weeks. The permits delayed the foundation work. They cleared Friday." He slid a document across the desk. "You have room to move it forward." She adjusted the timeline without making it a moment. They worked through the morning. He pushed back on 3 of her decisions, was right twice, and wrong once. When she proved him wrong on the curtain wall specification, he said noted, and moved on without making it about his ego. She kept her eyes on the drawings, and did not look at his face because she already knew what she would find there, and she did not need that information right now. The site visit was Thursday afternoon, the Atlanta heat pressing down on the construction zone as Camilla walked the east perimeter with Tyler and Paul, the lead contractor, going over the foundation progress. She was mid-sentence explaining the drainage specifications when Paul turned his body 90 degrees and directed his response entirely to Tyler. Tyler's hand came up before she could open her mouth. "She's still talking, Paul." Paul stopped. "The drainage specifications," Tyler said, his eyes moving back to Camilla. "You were saying." She finished her point without missing a beat and did not look at Tyler again for 10 minutes. They were walking the far end of the perimeter 20 minutes later when Tyler stepped up beside her to point out a framing issue along the east wall, leaning close to be heard over the machinery, his voice low near her ear. Her boot caught the edge of a loose cable, and she pitched forward, and his hand caught her at the lower back, firm and immediate. Some fingers spread wide, pulling her back against him for 1 second before she found her footing, and he let go. She turned and looked at him. "Cable on the left," he said, already walking. "I saw it," she said. He looked back at her over his shoulder, the corner of his mouth lifting just enough. "You clearly didn't." She turned back to the site and said nothing. Her back was still warm exactly where his hand had been. The words reached her about Stanley Cole the following week, an aggressive Atlanta developer quietly positioning his firm, the Drace Group, for the Barcelona government contract, the same contract her company was currently favored to win. Stanley did not compete cleanly. Two smaller firms had already withdrawn from the Barcelona bid under pressure, and nobody had been able to prove anything. Camila read the brief twice, set it down, and went back to work. She had not rebuilt this firm from nothing to withdraw from anything. By Friday evening, Camila needed a drink badly enough that she did not wait for her best friend to suggest it. Tiana was already at their usual table when she arrived. She took one look at her face before reaching for the bottle. "He moved your site model," Tiana said. It was a positioning issue. He shut down your contractor. Paul was he caught you when you tripped and held on 1 second too long." Camilla's hand tightened around her wine glass. "How do you even know about that?" "Because your voice just changed when I said it." Tiana set the bottle down and looked at her with the specific patience of a woman who had known her for 8. "Camila, that man is not acting like your boss. It's a contract, a business arrangement. The way you just squeezed that glass is not a business arrangement." Camila set the glass down deliberately. Tiana watched her do it and said nothing and let the silence sit exactly as long as it needed to. "Drink," she said finally, "and then tell me again how professional everything is." Camila drank slowly, knowing she was about to spill every word with the smile behind it. By week 3, Camila was suffocating, and the work was the only clean thing left. The work had rules. It was everything around it that was closing in. Tyler every morning, every site visit, every 7 p.m. call, with questions that were always legitimate, and always gave him a reason to stay on the line longer than necessary. She was excellent at being professional. She was finding it increasingly expensive. She told him Wednesday she had plans Friday and was not available after 5. Something crossed his face, fast and controlled, and he said, "Fine," and went back to the drawings without another word. She drove to Jade's party Friday evening with the specific relief of a woman who had been holding her shoulders up for 3 weeks and had finally been given permission to put them down. Jade's place was warm and loud and full of people having fun. Camila felt something in her chest loosen for the first time in weeks. She laughed at things that were actually funny. I'd stood near the window with a glass of wine and talked about work without talking about him, and felt like herself again. Easy, unguarded, the knot between her shoulder blades slowly unknotting. She had been there about an hour when the back of her neck prickled. She turned and scanned the room. Tyler was standing near the far wall. He was not dressed for a party, a drink in his hand that he was not tasting. He was watching her calmly, making no effort to pretend he hadn't followed her there. Their eyes met. He did not look away. He did not look sorry. He raised his glass slightly, unhurried, like they had agreed to meet here, and she was the one who was late. Her jaw tightened. She turned back to her conversation. 20 minutes later, a man appeared at her elbow. Confident smile, opening line already forming, body angled toward hers before he had finished crossing the room. She was midway through the polite version of not interested when the air at her back shifted, and Tyler was there, his hand settling at the small of her back with the calm certainty of a man who had never once considered that this position was not his. She felt the warmth of his palm through the fabric of her dress. The man in front of her looked at Tyler, looked at his hand, looked at Tyler's face, and left. And she turned to face Tyler with the full intention of telling him exactly what she thought about men who crashed parties they had not been invited to. Then she made the mistake of looking directly at him, close enough to see the exact shade of his eyes in the low light, close enough to catch his cologne underneath the noise and heat of the party. He was looking at her with that steady, unhurried focus that made every other person in the room disappear, and the words she had prepared dissolved before they reached her mouth. She looked away first. "You followed me," she said to her wine glass. "I was in the area. You were in the area of a private party you were not invited to. You looked uncomfortable. I was handling it. Now you don't have to." He said it simply, so it's completely unbothered by her tone or the fact that she was gripping her wine glass hard enough that her knuckles had gone tight. She stared at him. He looked back with that infuriating patience, and took a calm sip of his drink. And she could not find a single thing wrong with his logic and hated him for it. He drove her home. She stared out the passenger window and said nothing. He let the silence sit for exactly 2 minutes before he spoke. "God, you were smiling before he walked over." She turned to look at him. "What?" "At the party. Before he came over to you. You were laughing at something and your whole face changed." He kept his eyes on the road, one hand easy on the wheel. "I don't like other men watching you smile like that." Her stomach dropped. "Tyler, I'm not asking for anything. Just telling you what I don't like." She turned back to the window. "You don't get to have opinions about who watches me smile." "Probably not." He said it like a man who had already made peace with the fact that he was going to have those opinions regardless. They rode in silence for another block, and then his voice came again, quieter. "You still do that thing when you're trying not to laugh. Press your lips together and look away real quick." Her breath left her. "You're not supposed to notice things like that." "I know." He said it simply, like a confession that cost him nothing. She turned to look at his profile in the dark, and her chest was doing something she did not have a name. He pulled up outside her building and put the car in park. She reached for the door handle. "Next time, tell me where you're going," he said quietly. "So, I don't have to follow you." She ignored him and got inside, then pressed her back against the door. Her heart was going faster than she was going to admit to anyone. She stood there for a long time before she moved. The Barcelona government contract landed on a Tuesday, and it was the biggest win of Camilla's career. She sat with it for 60 seconds, her firm's name across the top, 10 years of difficult rooms made real. Then she got back to work. The threatening message arrived Thursday morning. It named the Barcelona contract, named her firm, referenced decisions made in private meetings. The message was clear: drop the bid or face consequences. She read it twice and sat with it for 3 hours without telling anyone. She had built this firm alone. She handled things alone. She had just reached for her phone when her office door opened, and Tyler walked in. He looked at the message on her desk before he looked at her, which told her everything. Her jaw tightened. "How long have you known?" "This morning." He held her gaze and said nothing. That was its own answer. She pushed back from her desk and stood. "Now you have someone watching my office. I have someone watching the building. That is not what I asked. Camilla, this is my firm, Tyler, my contract, my problem to handle. It became my problem the moment Cole decided to come at someone under my protection." The word landed in the room and sat there. She felt it move through her chest and told herself it was anger. "I am not under your protection. I am under contract with your company. Those are different things." He looked at her for one long moment and put it away. He picked up the message from her desk and read it in full without asking permission. Set it back down. "This cannot happen again," he said quietly. "You get something like this, I hear about it the same minute you do, not 3 hours later. You don't get to make that call." "I just did." She stared at him. He looked back with that flat, patient certainty, and she wanted to throw something at his head, and the worst part was that underneath the fury, her hands were not entirely steady, and they both knew why, and it had nothing to do with the contract. He held her gaze one more moment before walking to the door. He stopped with his hand on the frame without turning around. "Lock your office when you leave tonight," he said quietly. "And don't walk to your car alone." He walked out and left her standing there with her hands pressed flat on her desk, her heart going faster than she was going to admit to anyone, and the specific unsettling awareness that the way Tyler Brett had just looked at her had nothing professional left in it, at all. The second message arrived Monday morning, and it was worse than the first. It had her coffee order, the exact time she left her building every morning. So the parking spot she used in the garage, and a description of what she had been wearing on Thursday when she worked late and walked to her car alone at 9 p.m. Someone had been watching her, not from a distance, but closely, for days. She sat with it at her desk and felt the specific cold of realizing that the world outside her office had been rearranged without her knowledge. And she was still sitting there when her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Drop the bid, or the next message won't be on paper. She was still at her desk at 7 that evening when the door opened. Tyler walked in with 2 members of his security team and a packed bag she recognized immediately as hers. Her overnight bag, her toiletry case, the specific canvas tote she kept on her bedroom chair. And she stared at it and felt the floor shift slightly under her feet. "Your team went into my apartment," she said, her voice quiet. "Yes." Without asking me. "Yes." She stood up slowly. "Tyler, you cannot just. He knows your parking spot." Tyler set the bag down on her desk and looked at her with an expression that had no performance in it, no patience, just a man who had spent the afternoon reading a surveillance report and arrived at a very specific conclusion. "He knows what you were wearing Thursday night. Oh, he knows you were alone in that garage at 9:47. He paused. "You are not going back to your apartment until this is handled. That is not your decision." "You're right." The agreement stopped her cold. "It's not in the contract," he said, his voice dropping. "I don't have the right to tell you where to sleep." He looked at her steadily. "I'm asking you, Camilla. Not telling you. Asking. Let me handle this one." The room was very quiet. His security team had stepped back to the doorway, and it was just the 2 of them and the bag on her desk and the specific weight of a man who had put down every weapon he had and was standing there with nothing but a question. Her throat tightened. She looked at the bag. She looked at him. She picked up her bag. His breath left him, just enough that she saw it. And he stepped back and said, "Let's go." And she walked out ahead of him. The penthouse sat on the 40th floor, and the moment the elevator opened, she understood Tyler did not use the word security loosely. 2 of his team at the entrance, a monitoring station built into the far wall, Atlanta 40 floors below. She walked to the windows and felt the weight of it, standing exactly where he had been intending to put her, in a space that was locked down and completely his. "Your room is the second door on the left," Tyler said behind her. "So Daniel is on through the night if you need anything. You're safe here." She kept her eyes on the city. "I know," she said, and hated how easily and completely she meant it. She showered, changed into the clothes his team had packed, which meant Tyler had told someone exactly what to pull from her closet, which she was not going to think about. She set her phone face down on the nightstand, without reading the messages, turned the lights off, waited for sleep that did not come. She was still awake at midnight when the knock came. 3 quiet raps. "Camilla." Tyler's voice, low and close through the door. She sat up. "What's wrong?" The door opened. He was not wearing a shirt. She registered it completely and immediately, her eyes doing a full inventory before her brain caught up with the situation. He was holding his phone, saying something about a perimeter alert on the guest wing. But the words were arriving at approximately half speed because Tyler Brett was standing in her doorway at midnight, and her defenses were absolutely not up. He stopped talking. The silence lasted 3 full seconds. She felt the exact moment he realized she had not heard a single word, and the corner of his mouth moved, just slightly. "Camilla," he said. "I heard you," she said immediately. "What did I say?" "The perimeter. What about it?" She lifted her chin. "There was an alert." There was. He leaned against the doorframe, completely unbothered, arms crossing over his chest, in a way that was not helping her situation at all. "The guest wing is not the secured part of the penthouse. I need you in my room tonight." She stared at him. "Your room." "My room has reinforced walls and direct monitor access. The guest wing doesn't." He tilted his head slightly. "Unless you'd like to keep staring at me and we can discuss it out here." The heat that moved up her neck, she picked up her pillow and walked past him into the corridor, with her eyes deliberately forward, and her jaw set, and her pulse going at a pace she refused to acknowledge. His suite was at the far end of the penthouse, the Atlanta skyline visible through the windows, even in the dark, a monitoring setup near the door beside the chair he clearly intended to spend the night in, and the bed was on the far side of the room. She crossed to it, got in, pulled the covers up. She could hear him settle into the chair, the soft hum of the monitors, the quiet shift of his weight. She stared at the ceiling and told herself this was a security arrangement. Nothing more. The room was quiet for a long time. His breathing was steady from across the room. She laid in the dark and stared upward, and was so acutely aware of every small sound he made that her skin felt too tight, on her body tuned to his presence, the way it had been since the site visit, since the party, since the moment he walked into her office and rearranged everything. Then his voice came through the dark, low and unhurried and completely deliberate. "You remember the hallway?" Her stomach dropped. He did not fill the silence. He let those 4 words sit there and do exactly what he intended, and she lay completely still, with her heart going so fast she could feel it in her fingertips, and said nothing. "My graduation party," he continued, quiet and certain. "That dark hallway. Your back against the wall. You kissed me back, Camilla. Every single second of it, you kissed me back, and we both enjoyed it." Her breath came out unsteady, and she pressed her lips together and stared at the ceiling and did not answer. "Then you pulled back and straightened your dress and hair and told me it was a mistake." The room fell silent. "Your hands were shaking when you said it." She closed her eyes. Her chest was so tight it was difficult to breathe evenly. "Tyler, I'm not asking you anything." His voice was completely level, completely calm, a man who had all the time in the world and knew it. "I just want you to know that I have thought about that moment. The advice you gave me, the way you looked at me before you pulled back, the way you said my name." She heard him shift in the chair, his voice dropping lower. "And I want you to know that I am not 21 anymore. Fine, I may be your brother's best friend, but the next time we end up in a dark room together, I am finishing what we started." The silence that followed was the loudest thing she had ever heard. Her pulse was hammering in her throat. Her hands had curled into the sheets without her telling them to. She laid completely still and felt every word of it moving through her body like a current she had no idea what to do with. And she said nothing, because there was nothing she could say that would not give him exactly what he was waiting for. He simply left it there in the dark between them, certain and unhurried, and went quiet. The monitors hummed softly, while Camilla had a long thought before she finally fell asleep. Camilla was standing at the kitchen counter when the elevator opened, and Austin walked out. She stared at him. He was still in his travel clothes, a carry-on rolling behind him. His jaw set in the way it had been since they were children, when he had decided something was wrong and he was going to do something about it. She had not called him. She had not told anyone. She had been careful and deliberate about every single part of this situation, and none of it had mattered. "How did you get in?" It came out flat. "How did you even know I was here? There is a security team downstairs, Tyler's people. They don't just let—" "I saw it on a blog." Austin dropped his bag in the middle of the floor and looked at her with an expression she had not seen on his face for a long time. "An industry blog I follow. C. Jones Architecture Group Financial Collapse. I read it twice because I thought it was a mistake. Then I called you, and you didn't pick up, so I got on the first flight out." His voice was completely level, and that was worse than if he had been yelling. "I went to your apartment first. Knocked for 10 minutes. Nothing. So I called Tyler because he is in the city, and I thought maybe he had heard something. You know what he did? No confusion. No surprise. He just said, 'She's with me, here's the address,' and told his lobby to clear me straight up." He looked at her steadily. He was waiting for me to call Camilla. He knew exactly what he was doing. The coffee cup in her hand went very still. He set this up. Austin's eyes were on her face, on reading everything she was not saying. "Didn't he? What's happening?" She set the cup down and said nothing, and that was its own answer. "How long?" His voice dropped. How long have you been in trouble? It's handled now. How long, Camilla? 6 weeks. The silence that followed had weight in it. Austin closed his eyes for exactly 2 seconds. When he opened them, her throat closed. Her chest ached. Her eyes stung. She looked away first. 6 weeks. He said it quietly, always like he was testing the weight of it. You were drowning for 6 weeks and you did not call me. He moved closer, his hands open at his sides. I would have been on a plane the same night without questions. No conditions. You let me find out from a blog. Because you would have come. Her voice cracked slightly and she steadied it. You would have dropped everything and made it your problem. And it wasn't your problem. I built that firm with my name on the door. My name, Austin. My initial. On completely mine. I was not going to be the woman who fell apart and called her little brother to come fix it. I'm not a fix. His voice rose for the first time. I'm family. There is a difference and you know it. I know. Then why does it never feel like you believe that? The question landed in the room and sat there. Austin looked away. His eyes moved slowly around the room, and his hands closed into fists at his sides. And why are you here? Of every hotel in Atlanta. Of every option available to you. You are living in Tyler Brett's personal penthouse. He turned back to her. Why him, Camilla? Why my best friend instead of me? She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Because the honest answer lived somewhere she had not let herself look directly at yet, and she could not give it to her brother in Tyler's penthouse at 8 in the morning without admitting things she was not ready to say out loud. The silence stretched between them, and Austin watched her face, and she felt him reading everything she was not giving him, and she could not stop it. Then the air in the room changed. Tyler was standing in the doorway. He had come in quietly, his eyes moving from Austin to Camilla in one clean assessment, reading the room completely. He crossed to where she was standing and stopped just behind her left shoulder, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him at her back, and looked at Austin with an expression that was calm and direct and completely unafraid of whatever was about to happen. Austin looked at him. You want to explain to me why my sister is living in your house? The threats against her were specific and physical. Tyler's voice was level. Her apartment couldn't be controlled. Mine can. You couldn't have put her in a hotel. I could have. He paused. I didn't want to. Austin's jaw hardened. He looked at Camilla. Pack your bag. So you're coming with me right now. Tyler stepped forward, one smooth step that put him between Austin and Camilla, his eyes going directly to her face and staying there. Not Austin's face. Hers. His voice dropping to something quiet and deliberate. She's not a hostage, Austin. She's safe here. He held her gaze with that steady, focused certainty that made everything else in the room go distant. Tell your brother you want to leave, Camilla. So look him in the eye and tell him you want to walk out of here right now after what we shared years back. She looked at Tyler. She looked at Austin. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. The silence sat in the room for 3 full seconds and did all the work that words would have done. Austin's eyes moved between them, and she watched the realization form on his face. The way Tyler was standing in front of her, the way she had not moved, the way her silence had just told her brother more than she had told him in 6 weeks. His chest rose with a sharp breath. Camilla, it was never just business, Austin. Tyler's voice came quiet and final into the room, still looking at Camilla, not Austin, but her. It hasn't been since our graduation party. Austin went completely still. His hands dropped to his sides. He turned and looked at Camilla, and she felt it. The moment his eyes found her face, and found no denial there. She watched him put the timeline together in real time, watched the pieces move behind his eyes. His graduation party, 5 years ago, his best friend, his sister, a hallway he had been downstairs from, and each piece arrived visibly in the set of his jaw, the slight drop of his shoulders, the way his breath came out unsteady, and then went very controlled. Tyler turned back to Camilla, and his hand came to rest at the small of her back, unhurried and calm, completely deliberate, with the possessive ease of a man who had decided that Austin seeing this was exactly the point. His thumb pressed once against the fabric of her shirt. Gentle, certain. A statement made without a single word. Austin's eyes dropped to Tyler's hand. His whole body went rigid. He looked at Camilla's face. She had not stepped away, had not moved at all, her breath shallow, her eyes on Tyler's face with an expression that confirmed every single thing Austin had just been told. Austin looked at Tyler and then back at her, and the silence in the room was the loudest thing any of them had ever stood inside of. Tyler's thumb moved again, one slow, deliberate press. Tyler, her voice came out sharp enough to cut glass. Get out. His eyes went very quiet. He held her gaze for one long moment, long enough that Austin saw it, long enough that there was no version of this that left any of them with any more secrets about what it meant. And then he gave a single quiet nod, and removed his hand from her back and walked out. The door closed behind him and left the two of them standing in the full devastating weight of everything that had just been said, without words. Austin stood at the window with his back to her, one hand gripped around the back of his neck, completely still. When he turned around, his voice was very quiet. Sit down, he said. We need to talk about all of it. She sat. He sat across from her, and for a long moment neither of them spoke, so Camilla broke it first. Are you mad at me? For hiding the debt? For all of it? Austin looked at her for a long moment. I don't even know how to answer that right now. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands linked. 5 years, Camilla. He has been carrying this for 5 years, and I had no idea. I was in the same room as both of you. He shook his head slowly. That is a lot to sit with. I know. And the bankruptcy. He looked at her directly. You should have called me. I'm not going to pretend that didn't hurt because it did. His voice was honest and even, and that was harder to take than anger. But I'm not angry. I'm relieved I finally know. All of it. Her throat tightened. I didn't want you to worry. I know that. He stood and crossed to where she was sitting, and she stood without thinking about it, and he pulled her in, both arms, the specific way he had hugged her since they were children when something was too big for words. She pressed her face into his shoulder and held on, and felt something in her chest that had been clenched for 6 weeks finally released. 2 days later, the professional mask was fully back in place. Camilla was in Tyler's office alone, the Barcelona project file spread across the desk, her focus locked, and her walls rebuilt after the wreckage of Austin's visit. She heard the door open behind her and did not look up. The footsteps crossed the room with the unhurried, deliberate pace she would have recognized anywhere, coming directly toward her chair. And then his hands came down on the desk on either side of her, both palms flat, arms bracketing her completely, and Tyler's chest pressed against the back of her chair, and his mouth dropped close to her ear, while the heat of him surrounded her on all sides before she had taken her next breath. She did not flinch, did not look up. I kept her pen moving on the page and her eyes on the contract, her breathing completely steady, and gave him absolutely nothing. His voice came low and close, his lips near her temple. If Austin walked in right now. Austin is not here. No. He paused, his breath warm against her skin. But you just thought about the last time someone almost walked in on us, and it made you hot. Another pause. Your pulse just changed, Camilla. I can see it in your throat. Her pen stopped moving. She set it down with deliberate calm and lifted her chin. Get out of your own office, Tyler. He did not move. Then slowly, deliberately, his fingers closed around the armrests of her chair and turned her to face him. She opened her mouth. He stepped between her knees, took her hands, drew her up out of the chair and pulled her against his chest. His arms closed around her completely, tight across her back, his face dropping into her hair. He exhaled, long and slow, the specific exhausted breath of a man who had been holding something for a very long time and had finally put it down. His lips found her temple and pressed there, warm and unhurried and completely devoted. "You can fight me all day, Camilla." His voice was barely above a whisper. "But I'm not going anywhere. Austin deserves to know. We can't hide it from him forever." Her hands were flat against his chest. They did not push. She felt the heat of him through the fabric, the steady thunder of his heartbeat under her palms. Her fingers curled into his shirt. She gripped it tighter, drew him closer, inhaled every scent of him, and didn't let go, and didn't pull away. And that said everything she had been refusing to say out loud for weeks. He held her for a long moment. Then he released her slowly, stepped back, looked at her face with that quiet, certain expression. He had seen exactly what her hands just did, and was not going to say a single word about it. He took one stunning glance at her and walked to the door, closed it behind him without looking back. She stood alone in the middle of his office, her hand still curved from holding his shirt, the warmth of his mouth still sitting on her temple, the slow, devastating understanding that she had run out of room to pretend settling over her like something that had been waiting a long time to finally land. Austin arrived at Tyler's office at 7 in the evening. Tyler was standing at the window with his hands in his pockets, his back partially turned, and he did not look surprised. He had been expecting this since the moment he walked out of his own house 3 days ago and left the two of them in the wreckage. Austin stood in the middle of the room and looked at his best friend, and when he spoke, his voice was completely quiet, and that was the most dangerous thing about it. "You were in our house every weekend?" He said it without raising his voice, without heat, just the specific weight of a man laying something on a table that needed to be looked at directly. "She used to bring us food while we played video games. You sat at our kitchen table. You came to our mother's funeral." He paused. "You have been in my family for 10 years, Tyler, and you were looking at her the whole time." Tyler turned from the window. He did not flinch, and did not reach for an explanation or a justification or anything that would have made this easier to stand inside. He just looked at Austin and let every word of it land exactly where it was aimed. "Yes," he said, "I was." The admission sat in the room between them. Austin's eyes dropped to the floor. He exhaled slowly, his hands curling into fists at his sides. "Tell me what happened 5 years ago," he said. "All of it. From the beginning." Tyler was quiet for a moment. Then he told him. The balcony at the graduation party, Camilla finding him there, 40 minutes of honest conversation. The way she looked at his idea and found the exact place where the foundation gave way and told him the truth about it when everyone else in that room had just laughed. The way that felt. The hallway afterward. The dark. The kiss that was not a small thing and was not a drunk mistake and was not something either of them had planned. Austin's voice coming from down the hall, her pulling back, straightening her dress, telling Tyler he was 21 and it was a mistake. Austin stood very still through all of it, his arms crossed over his chest, his eyes on Tyler's face. When Tyler finished, Austin was quiet for a long moment, and then he said, "She told you it was a mistake because you were 21 and she was 29. Also my best friend. Did you let it sink into your head?" "Yes." Austin looked at him. "Did you spend 5 years building an empire just to become someone she couldn't say that to?" Tyler said nothing. The answer was already in the room. Austin turned to the window. He stood there with his back to Tyler, one hand gripping the back of his neck, and Tyler watched him process it, the full scale of it, on 5 years of every business deal and every calculated move and every dollar accumulated toward a single specific destination. And he did not rush him, and he did not fill the silence, because Austin had earned every second of it. When Austin finally turned back around, his expression had moved through something and come out the other side, into a place that was quieter and more complicated than anger. "You're unhinged," Austin said. "Sure, you know that." "Yes, I know. You bought her debt." He said it flatly. "You moved her into your penthouse. You have had a security team on her for weeks." He stared at Tyler. "This is not a man with feelings for a woman. This is a 5-year master plan." "Yes," Tyler said simply. "It is." Austin stared at him for a long moment. Then he laughed, short and humorless and slightly disbelieving, and shook his head and looked at the ceiling and then back at Tyler. She has no idea how deep this goes. Not yet. And you're going to tell her everything when the time is right. Austin paced, crossed to the window and back, his hands linked behind his head. Tyler stood where he was and let him pace and said nothing. Finally, Austin stopped. He looked at Tyler with the specific expression of a man who had arrived at a conclusion he had not entirely wanted to reach. The Drace Group is not going away, Austin said. Stanley Cole is not going to stop. He held Tyler's gaze. You have the resources and the reach to protect her from what's coming. He paused. I hate that that's true right now. But it's true. Tyler said nothing. She is the most important person in my life. Austin's voice dropped. She raised me. She worked 3 jobs to keep us in that apartment after Mom died, and she never once complained about it. She built that firm from nothing with her own hands. He took one step closer, and his voice going quiet and absolute. If you hurt her, if you manipulate her, or control her, or make her feel small in any way, I will end you. I don't care what you've built. I don't care what you're worth. I will burn every single piece of it to the ground. Tyler looked at his best friend. He did not flinch, did not look away. When he spoke, his voice was completely level and carried the specific weight of a man who meant every syllable of what he was about to say. If I ever hurt her, on Austin, he said quietly, I won't make you do it. He held his gaze. I'll hand you the gun myself. The room went completely still. Austin held his gaze for a long moment. He did not speak. He looked at Tyler's face like he was searching for something to argue with and could not find it. Then he looked away, his jaw tight, and walked to the door. His hand rested on the frame for just a second before he pushed through it. Camilla submitted the final Barcelona confirmation on a Tuesday morning and did not tell Tyler until it was already done. She walked into his office, set the confirmation document on his desk, and looked at him. I'm going, she said. Cole's threats do not get to be the reason I walk away from the biggest contract of my career. Tyler looked at the document, looked at her face, said nothing for a long moment. Then he picked up his phone and made a single call. Clear my schedule for the rest of the week, he said. All of it. He ended the call and looked at her. When do we leave? Because you're not going there alone. Barcelona received them on a warm evening. Their hotel rooms were on the same floor, connected by a shared sitting room that Tyler had arranged without consulting her, and that she had decided not to make an argument about. She had her own space. That was enough. The client dinner was the following evening, and Camilla spent the afternoon reviewing her presentation and later realized when unpacking that she had forgotten her usual perfume at the penthouse. She went to a small shop near the hotel and found something entirely different, dark and warm and nothing like anything she usually wore, and bought it without thinking about it too deeply. She put it on that evening, got dressed, and walked through the connecting door into the shared sitting room. Tyler was already there, jacket on, phone in hand, and he looked up when she entered and went completely still. She watched the phone lower slowly to his side. He crossed the room without any hurry, closing the distance between them with the calm, deliberate movement of a man who had already decided what he was going to do and stopped directly in front of her. Too close. He leaned in, his face dropping to the curve of her neck, and she felt his breath against her skin. Slow and controlled, a man testing his own patience and not entirely winning, before he straightened and looked at her with an expression that had nothing professional left in it. Go wash it off. His voice was low and completely final. Because if you walk into a room full of men smelling like that, I'm not going to be responsible for what I do to the first one who gets close enough to breathe it in. Her chin lifted. I'm not washing it off. She heard him curse under his breath. He looked at her like a man losing a fight he had already decided not to win. He held her gaze for one long moment and then stepped back, and she felt his eyes on her back the entire way out the door. The dinner was held in a private room overlooking the harbor. 40 people from the client team and various project stakeholders. The kind of room that hummed with the energy of important decisions being made over expensive wine. And Camilla walked in and presented to the lead client team with the focused precision of a woman who had built her entire career for exactly this kind of room. Tyler stood at the edge of her peripheral vision the entire time. She was aware of him. An hour into the evening, she found herself in genuine conversation with Marco, one of the lead architects from the Barcelona client team. Easy, warm, the kind of professional rapport that built itself without effort. She laughed at something he said and felt her shoulders drop for the first time since they had landed. She reached for her wine glass and glanced across the room without planning to, and found Tyler already watching her. His drink was in his hand and going nowhere near his mouth. His jaw was locked. His eyes moved from her face to Marco and back to her face in one slow, deliberate sweep that said everything he was not allowed to say out loud in the middle of a client dinner in Barcelona. She held his gaze for exactly 2 seconds, long enough to make sure he saw her smile, and turned back to Marco and laughed at something that was not even that funny, her hand touching Marco's arm lightly as she did it. She did not look back across the room because she did not need to. She could feel exactly what was happening to his jaw from feet away. They did not speak on the way back to the hotel until they reached their door. Tyler stopped beside her. She could smell his cologne in the close air of the corridor, and she was still wearing the perfume, and neither of them moved for a moment that lasted slightly longer than it should have. "Good night, Tyler," she said. "Good night, Camilla," he said, his voice rough at the edges. He walked to his own door. She went inside and closed hers. The flight home was 3 hours. She fell asleep against the window 40 minutes in and woke somewhere over the Atlantic with his jacket over her shoulders, warm, smelling exactly like him. None of them spoke together until they landed back in Atlanta. Tyler had been staring at the same page of numbers for 20 minutes when Emily set her pen down. Emily had been his CFO since the beginning, the one person who had seen every move he had made and knew exactly what each one had cost him. She was not someone he could perform composure for. She closed the folder in front of her with careful, deliberate movement and looked across the desk at him. "You haven't heard a word I've said in the last 10 minutes, she said. "I heard you. What did I say?" He looked at her, said nothing. She leaned back in her chair. "Tyler." Her voice was quiet. "How long are you going to do this to yourself?" "Do what?" "Sit 5 feet away from the thing you want and call it a security arrangement." He looked at the window. "It's complicated," he said. "It's only complicated because you made it that way." She set her pen down. "I've seen the paper trail. I know exactly which doors you closed and when." Her voice was not accusatory. It was the voice of a woman stating facts she had been sitting on and had run out of reasons to keep sitting on. "Oh, she doesn't know yet." "No." Emily looked at him a moment longer, picked up her laptop, closed it, and stood without being asked. She was at the door when his phone buzzed on the desk. Simone, his head of security, was calling. He picked up. "Tell me." "It's done." Simone's voice was clipped and efficient. "The Drace Group is dismantled. Cole's financial backing has been pulled. 3 separate sources, all dried up simultaneously. He has no infrastructure left to operate from. Ms. Jones is no longer a target." Tyler sighed. "It's over." Tyler ended the call and set the phone down and looked out the window. The relief that moved through him had nothing professional left in it. Emily was still standing in the doorway. She watched his face, and whatever she saw there made her press her lips together and nod once and walk out without a word. At home, he found her in the sitting room, papers spread across the entire table, her laptop open beside them, her pen moving in the margin of a slow drawing. Her left hand was pressed flat against her temple. She did not look up when he entered. He crossed the room, stood beside her, looked at her face, and saw it immediately. The tightness around her eyes, the pallor of a migraine that had been building for hours. She had not told him, had not asked for anything, was sitting alone pushing through a blinding headache with a full set of papers and the absolute refusal to stop. He reached down and took the pen from her hand. She looked up. "I'm in the middle of—" He closed her laptop. "Tyler." He pulled the papers to the side, stacked them with one hand, crouched beside her chair, and looked at her face directly and said nothing because he did not need to. She looked back at him, and something in her eyes was not performing at all. He picked her up. She made a sound of protest, and he ignored it completely, carrying her down the hall to her room. He set her down on the bed, found her medication in the bathroom cabinet, and brought it back with a glass of water. She took it without arguing, which told him exactly how bad the pain was. He sat on the edge of the mattress and reached out and brushed her hair back from her face, his fingers pressing gently at her temple, and she closed her eyes. "I hate this," she said quietly. "I hate feeling like this." "I know." He kept his voice low. "Well, you've been running on nothing since Barcelona." "I'm fine." "You're not fine." His fingers pressed gently where her hand had been. She exhaled slowly. "You weren't weak 5 years ago when you had your hands in my hair." He felt her go still beneath his hand. "You just finally let go." His thumb traced slowly across her forehead with a smile. "Let go now, Camilla. I've got you." She did not answer. Her breathing slowed. Her shoulders dropped. She let go and slowly drifted to sleep. Tyler draped his jacket over her shoulders, pressed a kiss to her forehead, and went back to work until the city outside the windows went quiet, and he finally let himself sleep too. Camilla woke up to 43 messages. Tiana's dramatic, sweet voice note arrived first, then Austin's long and specific message that made her eyes sting slightly before she put the phone down. She was 35 today. She sat with that for a moment, her firm still rebuilding, so her life currently located inside someone else's walls, and felt the specific weight of a milestone that had arrived at a complicated time. She got up, dressed up, and treated it like any other day. She was in her room at 6 that evening when she found a box. It was sitting on her bed, large, cream-colored, tied with a ribbon. She crossed to it and lifted the ribbon and found a small card tucked beneath it. 4 words in his handwriting, clean and direct. "Wear this. Come to dinner." She pulled the ribbon and lifted the lid. The dress was silk, deep burgundy, made for her size, a sweet thought that he had been paying very close attention. She lifted it from the box and felt the weight of it in her hands. She set it aside and looked at what was underneath it and went very still. The lingerie was the color of champagne, delicate and deliberate, and exactly the kind of thing a man bought for a woman he had been thinking about in significant detail. She stood there and looked at it and felt the heat move up her throat. No note for this part. He did not need one for this either. She put it on, all of it, smooth against her skin, and she stood in front of the mirror, looked at herself, and felt the specific, complicated weight of being seen this completely by someone she had been trying very hard not to be seen by. She looked like a woman who had stopped pretending. Then she went to dinner. Tyler was standing at the table when she walked in. He had arranged it in the main room of the penthouse. Candles, no security team visible, no work on the table, nothing professional about any of it. He was in white shirt, and he turned when she entered and looked at her, and something in his face went very still. His eyes moved over her once before coming back to her face. "Happy birthday, Camilla." His voice was completely even, and she could hear exactly what that evenness was costing him. She sat down across from him and picked up her wine glass. "You went through my files. Your assistant mentioned it 6 weeks ago. I remembered." He sat, lifted his own glass. His eyes did not leave her face. "You look beautiful." She said nothing. The city glittered below, and the candles were warm between them, and he looked at her across the table like she was the only fixed point in the room. They ate. They talked. Not about work, not about the contract, nor not about any of the things that lived between them during the day. He asked her about the firm she had dreamed about before C. Jones existed, the version she had sketched in notebooks before she had the nerve to make it real. She told him. He listened the way he always listened, completely, waiting for his turn to speak. And she felt the wall she had been maintaining since Barcelona doing something she could not stop. She was reaching for her wine when her phone lit up on the table. Phone, an unknown number. Congratulations on surviving this long. Enjoy the birthday. Things are about to get much harder. Her hand went still on the glass. Tyler saw it. His eyes dropped to the screen and came back to her face, cold and controlled. It's handled, he said quietly. Cole has nothing left. This is noise. He reached across the table, took her phone, turned it face down, left his hand resting over it. Look at me. She looked at him, so that you are safe. His voice was low and completely certain. I told you I would handle it, and I handled it. You are sitting at this table on your birthday, and you are safe. That is the only thing that is true right now. She looked at his hand over her phone, looked at his face, felt the full accumulated weight of every moment since he walked into her office. The site visit, the party, the safe room while he sat across from her, telling her she was safe, like it was the simplest fact in the world. And something in her chest cracked open completely. She stood up. He watched her come around the table. He did not move. He did not speak. When she stopped in front of him, he looked up at her with an expression that had been waiting 5 years to be looked at directly, and she looked at it directly and reached out and took his face in her hands and kissed him. He kissed her back immediately. His hands found her waist and pulled her closer. It was exactly like the hallway 5 years ago. The same current, the same spark, the same electricity of two people who had been circling something inevitable and had finally stopped pretending otherwise. Her hands went into his hair. She felt him exhale against her mouth like a man who had been holding his breath for 5 years and had finally been given permission to stop. His mouth moved to her jaw, her throat, the curve of her neck. His hands moved slowly along the silk at her waist, her ribs, learning the shape of her through the fabric. Her breath came out unsteady. Her fingers tightened in his hair. As the evening continued, there was nothing professional left in the room, and she was wearing his dress and his lingerie on her birthday, inside his penthouse, inside his contract. And that thought arrived like cold water. She quickly pulled back. Her hands came to his chest. He stopped immediately, hands stilling, pulling back, giving her space the moment she asked for it. She stood there with her forehead tipped toward his, her breathing uneven, her hands flat against his chest, and said nothing for a moment, because she needed to find the words underneath the wanting. I can't. Her voice came out unsteady. Not like this. He was very still. Like what? Inside all of this. She pressed her hands against his chest. Your contract, your penthouse, owned by your dress on my body. Her voice broke slightly on the last word. I don't know what I'm choosing and what I was maneuvered into. I need to know the difference. I need to choose you from outside all of this, or I will never know if it was real. He looked at her. His breathing was uneven. His eyes moved over her face, completely unguarded and completely wrecked. He did not argue, did not push, did not reach for her again. He looked at her for a long moment, lifted his hand slowly from her waist, and stepped back. His tongue moved across his lower lip. His jaw tightened. He looked at her one final time with everything he was not going to say, written plainly across his face. Then he walked out, left her standing in the candlelight in his dress, with her hand still warm from his hair, the city glittering below, not the full devastating weight of what had just almost happened, settling over her like something she was going to be sitting with for a very long time. Tyler stood at the sink with both hands on the counter and looked at himself in the mirror. She had kissed him. She had stood up from that table, come around to him, taken his face in her hands. He knew the difference between a woman who was maneuvered and a woman who decided. Tonight, she decided. His mouth still felt like her, although she was right to stop it. He knew that. She needed to choose him from outside all of it, and he understood that completely, and it still cost him something to walk out of that room. She was worth waiting for. 5 years had already told him that. He could wait a little longer. The message came on a Wednesday morning while Camilla was at the penthouse desk reviewing the final Barcelona deliverables. Ms. Jones, my name is Emily Wills. I am Tyler Brett's CFO. I have information you need to see. I would like to meet, without Tyler present. Please let me know if you are available this week. Camilla read it twice, set her phone down, picked it up and read it again. She typed back one line. Who are you to me, and why should I meet you without him? The response came within 2 minutes. I need to show you something important. You will understand why when you get here. Camilla sat with that for a long moment. Her eyes moved to the window, the specific quiet of a penthouse that had started to feel like hers over the past weeks and had no business feeling like hers at all. She thought about the birthday dinner, the dress, the kiss she had stopped because she could not give him everything from inside his terms and could not explain exactly why, except that something underneath all of it had never fully settled. She picked up her phone and typed back. Tomorrow. Noon. You pick the place. They met at a cafe in Midtown. Emily was already there when Camilla arrived, her laptop open on the table, a coffee in front of her that had gone cold. She was sharper in person than Camilla had expected. She stood when Camilla walked in and extended her hand. Thank you for coming. I haven't decided what I think about this yet, Camilla said, and sat down. Emily sat across from her and did not waste time. She turned the laptop to face Camilla and said simply, Start from the left column. I'd read every line. Camilla looked at the screen. The first column was a list of dates. The second was a list of names. Investor contacts, banking relationships, every professional door she had knocked on during those weeks when her firm was quietly dying. The third column was a series of financial transactions, each one time-stamped, each one traceable to a single source. She read the first line, read the second, but her eyes moved down the page and the picture finally assembled, slowly and then all at once, the specific cold of a realization arriving in the stomach before it reaches the brain. Her hand moved off the table. She did not notice until she looked down and found it in her lap, pressed flat against her thigh. Her coffee was still in front of her, untouched. She kept reading. Every door that had closed, every polite apology, every vague explanation that never quite made sense. She had spent weeks believing the market had turned against her. She had never had another choice, because he had made sure of it. She read the full document without speaking. Emily sat across from her and said nothing and let her read. When Camilla reached the final line, she sat back in her chair and looked at Emily. How long have you had this? Long enough, Emily said quietly. I did not know what to do with it for a while. She held Camilla's gaze. I know what he feels for you, and I've watched it for months, but you had a right to know. Camilla looked back at the screen, all of it real. She closed the laptop. Thank you, she said, her voice completely broken. She picked up her bag, stood up, and walked out of the cafe into the Midtown afternoon. She sat in her car for an hour until it became something she could carry. Then she drove back to the penthouse. She packed her bag quickly and was gone before he got home. Tyler came back to a penthouse that felt immediately wrong. He knew before he reached her room. The door was open. The closet was empty. Her toiletry case was gone from the bathroom shelf. No note, no call, just absence where she had been. He stood in the doorway and felt it hit him in the chest. A specific pain he had not prepared for, because some part of him had always believed he would be there when she found out. That he would be able to look at her face and say something that would make her stay. That 5 years of everything he had built would count for something in the moment it all came apart. He had not been there. She had packed her own bag and walked out alone, and he had not even been there to see her face. His throat tightened. He pressed the back of his hand to his mouth and stood in the empty doorway and looked at the room that still had the shape of her in it. The chair she had worked in, the window she had stood at, the bed he had sat on the edge of while she let go for the first time, and felt something move through his chest. She knew. She had seen every door, every transaction, every fingerprint he had left behind, and she had packed her bag in silence and walked out, and he did not know if she was ever coming back. That was the part that scared him, not that she was angry, not that she had left, that she might decide he was not worth coming back to, that the man he had become might not be enough to undo what the man he had been had done. He sat down on the edge of her bed, put his head in his hands, and stayed there for a long time. The emergency board meeting was called for 9 in the morning. Tyler walked in and took his seat at the head of the table and looked at the faces of the 7 people who had built Brett Development alongside him and said nothing. Emily was already seated to his left, her laptop open, and her expression giving nothing away. He had known the moment he saw the meeting request what this was. He had known since the night Camilla walked out of his elevator with her bag, who had given her the paper trail. He sat down and folded his hands on the table and waited. Emily presented the full documentation without preamble. Every acquisition, every investor contact that had been quietly redirected, or every financial transaction that had closed a door around Camilla's firm until she had nowhere left to turn. She laid it out with the clean, precise efficiency she brought to everything, walking the board through the timeline from beginning to end, and the room got very quiet in the specific way. Rooms got quiet when something true and uncomfortable was being said out loud for the first time. Board members shifted in their chairs. Questions were asked. Tyler answered each one directly, without deflection, without softening a single fact. Yes, he had acquired the debt. Yes, he had redirected the investor contacts. Yes, every decision had been deliberate. He did not apologize. He did not perform remorse for the benefit of the room. He stated what he had done and owned the full weight of it and let it sit. When the questions stopped, he stood up. "I'm taking a temporary leave of absence effective immediately," he said. "Henry Webb will assume operational oversight until I return. Every active project continues on schedule." He looked around the table at each face. "Brett Development is not the decisions I made in my personal life. This company was built by every person in this room, and it will continue without interruption." He picked up his phone from the table and walked out of his own boardroom without looking back. The building emptied slowly around him. He stood at the edge, watching the city below, and listening to the room clearing behind him, chairs pushing back, low voices, the soft close of the door as the last board member left. Then silence. He waited. He heard her footsteps stop behind him. "Tyler, don't." His voice was quiet. He did not turn around. "Not yet." Emily waited. The room was completely still. Everything they had built together, sitting in the silence, like something that had just been rearranged permanently. He turned around. He looked at her for a long moment. This woman who had been in every room with him since the beginning, who had seen every move he made and helped him make half of them, who had walked into his boardroom this morning with a laptop and dismantled 5 years of his decisions in front of every person who had ever trusted him with something real. He felt the specific weight of a betrayal that did not come from an enemy. "You went to the board," he said quietly. "Not to me. Not a phone call, not a conversation behind closed doors. And you walked into my boardroom and you executed me in front of every person I have ever built anything with." His chest rose. "We have been in every room together for 4 years, Emily. Every hard decision, every risk, every time this company almost didn't make it. You could have come to me. I did come to you." Her voice was sharp and completely steady. "I sat across from you in your office and told you I had seen the paper trail, and you looked out the window and said nothing. While you made your choice, I made mine. Your choice was to burn me publicly. My choice was to protect what we built." She stepped forward, her voice dropping to something harder and more precise. "I have given 4 years of my life to this company, Tyler. 4 years of 18-hour days and decisions that cost me things I am not going to list in this room. I watched you build this from nothing, and I helped you do it, and I am not going to stand here and watch you burn it to the ground because you lost your mind over a woman." Her chin lifted. "I didn't do this for her. I did it for Brett Development. I did it because this company deserved better than being collateral damage in your obsession. Tyler looked at her. His voice, when it came, was very quiet. I trusted you with everything I built. Every number, every move, every decision I made for 5 years. I handed you all of it. He held her gaze. And you used it to hold a knife to my back in my own boardroom. Yes, she did not flinch. I did. She picked up her laptop from the table. And you walked in there and owned every word of it without blinking, which means somewhere underneath all of this, you already knew it needed to come out. She looked at him steadily. You're not angry because I was wrong, Tyler. You're angry because I was right and I didn't give you the option to stop me. She moved toward the door. Get your head straight. The company needs you back. Whatever is happening with her, figure it out. But figure it out as a man, as Tyler, not as the CEO of this firm. She stopped at the door without turning around. You built something real here. Don't make me do that again. She walked out. Tyler stood alone in the empty boardroom, checkmated by the one person who knew every move he was going to make before he made it. He could not find a single thing wrong with her logic. He felt the cut of it anyway. And in the silence of everything she had just dismantled, his mind went to the only place it ever went now. Camilla. Camilla's apartment felt smaller than she remembered. She had not been back since the night she packed her bag and moved into Tyler's penthouse. She stood in the middle of her living room and felt the silence of it land differently until her phone suddenly rang. Have you heard? Austin asked when she picked up. Tyler took a leave of absence, owned everything in front of the whole room, and walked out. Camilla sighed slowly over the phone. She stared at the wall. Did he know I would find out? Silence fell on the line. Yes, Austin said. And he did it anyway. She sat with the answer for seconds, while the line stayed open between them, and Austin said nothing except to give her the moment. Austin, she said quietly, I'll call you back. She hung up, sat alone in her apartment in the silence, with confusion pouring all over her. 3 days passed. She did not call. He did not come. She moved through her apartment doing the things people did when they were thinking about something they had not yet decided. Making coffee. She forgot to drink, opening her laptop and closing it again, standing at the window, looking at Atlanta like it owed her an answer. The silence of her own space had stopped feeling flat and started feeling like something she was inside of, sitting with, turning over slowly in both hands. Austin came on the second day. He did not bring a speech or a plan or the specific younger brother energy that meant he had already decided what she should do and was going to talk her into it. He brought food from the Thai place on Peachtree she had loved since college and sat across from her at her kitchen table and ate with her and talked about small, ordinary things, a project he was working on something funny that had happened on his flight back from a work trip, and let the silence sit between the other things without making it heavy. Then he set down his fork and looked at her with the specific expression he had been wearing since the night in the penthouse when Tyler dropped that bomb and Austin had stood at the window putting 5 years together in real time. I have known Tyler Brett for a long time, he said quietly. I know every version of him. The one who slept on our couch almost every weekend, the one who sat at Mom's kitchen table and ate her food and never once took that for granted. He held her gaze. I may not have known this obsessed version of him, but I have never seen him look at anything the way he looks at you, Camilla. He picked up his fork again. But do whatever your mind says. She looked at her food and said nothing to him. Tiana arrived the following afternoon unannounced, the way Tiana always arrived, Anna with her good coat on and her earrings in, and the specific energy of a woman who had decided today was the day and was not leaving until her mission was accomplished. She walked in, looked at Camilla's face, looked around the apartment, and sat down on the couch with the expression of someone settling in for as long as it took. So, Tiana said, Tyler Brett. Tiana, your little brother's best friend. She tilted her head slowly. The man who has been obsessed with you since before he could legally drink. She pressed her lips together, like she was trying not to smile, and was not trying very hard. How does it feel, Camilla? Be honest. How does it feel knowing that while Austin was downstairs playing video games and eating your cooking, his best friend was upstairs thinking about you? Tiana teased. Camilla looked at her. That is not because I need you to understand, Tiana continued, completely unbothered. That this man built a billion-dollar empire. She held up one finger. For you. Another finger. He bought your debt. For you. A third finger. He put you in a penthouse with a security team. She paused for effect. For you. She looked at Camilla with wide, patient eyes. Most men will not even reply to a text on time. This man restructured the Atlanta investment landscape. She shook her head slowly. As a love language. Camilla stared at her for a long moment. Then she laughed. It came out before she could stop it. Real and full, and the specific laugh that meant something had cracked open that had been sealed shut for days. Tiana pointed at her immediately. There she is. My best friend is still in there. She leaned forward. Go get your man, Camilla. They don't make men like this again. Secure the best while you can. The least you can do is show up at his door now. Camilla was still smiling when Tiana left. She stood in the middle of her apartment for a moment after the door closed, her hand pressed lightly against her chest, feeling the warmth of having been seen, loved, and laughed at by someone who knew her. She made her decision, picked up her keys, and drove to the penthouse. Daniel let her up without calling ahead, which meant Tyler had left instructions, which meant some part of him had been expecting this and had made sure the door would be open when she came. She rode the elevator up alone and stood outside the penthouse door for exactly 3 seconds before she pushed it open. He was in the living room near the bar, a glass in his hand he was not drinking from. He was the most handsome man she had ever seen. Not because anything had changed in the way he looked, because everything had changed in the way she was looking at him. He turned when she walked in and went completely still. The glass lowered slowly to the bar behind him. He looked at her with nothing left covering his face. No composure, no patience, just a man who had spent 3 days alone in a penthouse that still had the shape of her in it, and had not let himself believe she was coming back. She looked at him and felt everything she had been carrying the past 3 days shift and settle. She crossed the room and stopped in front of him, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. I know everything, she said. Every door you closed, every investor, or every decision you made before you ever walked into my office. She held his gaze. I know all of it, and I came anyway. He looked at her for a long moment without moving. His jaw tightened. Something moved through his expression, swift and unguarded. The look of a man who had been holding himself completely still for 3 days and was running out of reasons to keep doing it. His hand came up slowly, and his fingers curved around her face, his thumb resting at her cheekbone, and she felt her breath leave her at the specific gentleness of it. This man who had moved through her life like a controlled demolition, being careful with her face, like it was the most valuable thing he had ever held. I'm sorry, he said quietly, for the doors, for taking the choice away from you before you knew there was one to make. His thumb moved slightly against her cheek. I would do it differently. I know, she said. I also know you would do it again. The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. Something more honest than a smile. Probably. Neither of them moved. The city kept moving behind him. His hand was warm against her face, and she could feel his breath while she looked at him. Really looked at him, all of it. And the man who had decided on a balcony at a graduation party and had not decided anything different since, and felt the last wall she had been holding come down so quietly, she almost did not notice it happening. Tyler, her voice came out low. Yes. Stop talking. He went still for 1 heartbeat. His eyes dropped to her mouth and came back up to her face, and she watched him decide. Watched the last of the composure he had been holding dissolve completely. And then his forehead dropped to hers, slow and deliberate, his eyes closing, just breathing her in for one single moment, like a man confirming something he had been waiting years to confirm. Then, his mouth found hers, and she kissed him back with everything she had been carrying. His hands moved from her face to her waist, pulling her closer, and she felt his exhale against her mouth. That same exhale from the birthday. The breath of a man who had finally been given permission to stop holding it. And she pulled him closer. He held on, and neither of them thought of pulling back. Later, they lay in the quietness of his room, with the city glowing through the windows, her head against his chest, his hand moving slowly through her hair. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Neither of them thought of pulling away from each other. 3 weeks later. Camilla was standing at the bathroom mirror doing her earrings when Austin called. She put him on speaker, set the phone on the counter, and listened to him talk while she worked the clasp, his voice filling the bathroom the way it always did. Loud, easy, completely Austin. Tyler was leaning in the bathroom doorway behind her, unready before she was. He was scrolling through his phone and saying nothing, and looked completely unbothered about the fact that they were already 7 minutes late. "I'm just saying," Austin was saying through the speaker. "I told you both 7 o'clock. It is currently 7:14. "We are leaving right now," Camilla said. "You are literally still doing your earrings." "I am finished with my earrings." "Tyler." Austin's voice shifted to the specific tone of a man appealing to his best friend for backup. "Tell her we're late." Tyler looked up from his phone and met Camilla's eyes in the mirror. The corner of his mouth moved. "We're on time," he said simply. "You are on her side," Austin said. "You are always on her side now. This is a betrayal." "I've always been on her side," Tyler said. "You just didn't know it." Camilla pressed her lips together, trying not to smile, and failed completely. Austin made a sound of profound suffering through the speaker. "This is my actual nightmare," he said. "My sister and my best friend teamed up to roast me in stereo, every single time. I should have never given you two my blessing." "You love it," Camilla said. "I absolutely do not love it." "Austin," Tyler's voice was completely serious. "How's the dating life?" Dead silence on the line. Camilla laughed, real and full, her whole face changing with it. The specific laugh that meant she wasn't managing anything or performing anything or holding anything back. Tyler watched her in the mirror with that expression she had stopped trying to name because she already knew exactly what it was. Austin launched into a defensive monologue about how his dating life was completely fine, and nobody needed to ask about it. And could they please just get in the car? But she was still laughing when she felt Tyler push off the doorframe and cross the bathroom to her. His arms came around her waist from behind, unhurried and completely certain. The way he did everything. His mouth found the curve of her neck and pressed there, warm and deliberate, and she felt it move through her shoulders and down her spine, and her eyes closed for exactly 1 second. "So, I'm just saying it's been a perfectly normal amount of time since my last date." Austin was still going through the speaker. Tyler lifted his head and met her eyes in the mirror. She looked back at him and felt the specific settled warmth of a Thursday evening that belonged entirely to her, chosen freely, built on nothing she had not decided herself. He reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, calm and unhurried, and she leaned back into his chest. He pressed a kiss to her forehead, slow and certain. His arms tightened around her, and she looked at her own face in the mirror, really looked at it, and saw a woman who had stopped performing composure because she no longer needed it. A woman who had walked through every door that had tried to close on her and was still standing. A woman who had chosen this, all of it, with both eyes open and both hands steady. Austin's voice was still coming through the speaker, unwarm and complaining and entirely theirs. She was smiling. She was happy. She was home. If you made it to the end of this story, you already know. Tyler Brett did not play fair. But neither did 5 years of waiting. Like and share it with someone who needs a love that is patient enough to restructure an entire city for them. What was the moment that broke you? Was it the birthday dinner, the boardroom, or Tyler at that sink? Tell me what moment got you. I will read every single one.